c'est la campagne Green Stop de l'année dernière, donc c'est la campagne aux îles Féroé. Je ne sais pas si certains d'entre vous connaissent un peu ce qui se passe aux îles Féroé. En fait, c'est là où il y a le plus gros massacre de mammifères marins en Europe. Les îles Féroé, ça se situe dans le nord, au nord de l'Écosse, entre l'Écosse et l'Islande, mais ça appartient au Danemark. En fait, c'est sous protectorat danois. Et donc, ils ont une tradition qui s'appelle le grind, ou le grindadrap, comme vous voyez écrit là. Et cette tradition viking, qui date de 2000 ans à peu près, de 9 siècles, ils tuent des globicéphales. Ce sont des gros dauphins noirs qui mesurent entre 6 et 10 mètres, donc très 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 gros dauphins noirs. Ils ont cette tradition de les tuer, donc là vous allez voir un résumé de tout ce qui s'est passé dans la campagne de l'année dernière. Qui a été, alors, la campagne de l'année dernière, il y avait des gens de Sea Shepherd, des bénévoles de Sea Shepherd à terre et en mer. Le micro, je ne sais pas qui c'est qui a le micro. Et en fait, pour tout ce qui s'est passé en mer, c'est la France qui a été... C'est la France qui a organisé tout ça en fait. Donc de toute façon, vous allez tout voir dans ce résumé-là et après on passe à la conférence.
Pas seulement connu pour ses activités au sein de Greenpeace et ensuite pour la création de sa fondation Sea Shepherd qui est tellement connue, mais surtout pour son acharnement militant et sa détermination à lutter en faveur de la protection et de la conservation des espèces, et notamment des espèces marines. Et pour ce, et en cédant la parole à Madame Magda, qui va le présenter un peu mieux que moi, je voudrais remercier Monsieur Paul Watson d'être parmi nous et lui souhaiter la bienvenue au lycée international Georges Duby.
Nous tenions d'ailleurs à remercier vivement Pilou Brown, qui se cache derrière, qui est également un parent d'élève de notre association, qui est la personne en fait qui nous a permis d'avoir ce contact et d'organiser concrètement cette rencontre. Nous tenions également à remercier la direction, M. Barr et Mme Regnault, pour nous avoir permis d'organiser cette conférence. But on top of all that, we would like to thank you, Mr. Watson, for being with us today. It's a huge honor and a tremendous opportunity for our students. We hope you will enjoy this conference as much as we do. Thank you.
You know, one of the things that people ask me all the time is, what should we teach children?
C'est une des questions que les gens me posent souvent, c'est qu'est-ce qu'on devrait enseigner à nos enfants?
And my answer is always nothing.
Ma réponse est toujours de dire rien du tout.
What we need to do is to encourage people's natural intuitions.
Ce qu'il faut, c'est encourager l'intuition naturelle des gens.
Children, especially young children, have an intuitive understanding of things.
Les enfants, et principalement les jeunes enfants, ont une compréhension intuitive des choses.
And what we tend to do in our society is to take that away from them.
Et ce qu'on a tendance à faire dans nos sociétés, c'est leur enlever ça.
So what we really need to do in our educational systems is to encourage people's natural talents and their understanding of the way things are from the beginning.
Donc ce qu'il faut que notre système d'éducation fasse, c'est encourager les talents naturels de nos enfants et encourager cette intuition naturelle, cette compréhension des choses qu'ils ont déjà en eux.
Years ago, I had an opportunity to teach two classes in the Queen Charlotte Islands, which is an American Indian reservation in Canada.
Il y a quelques années, je suis intervenue dans des écoles, dans une réserve d'Indiens aux États-Unis.
And that morning we were teaching or talking to the 6 and 7-year-olds, and in the afternoon the seniors.
Donc le matin, on était avec les jeunes enfants de 6 à 7 ans et l'après-midi avec des enfants plus jeunes de collège.
So when I went into the class, I said, "How many of you kids here speak Haida?"
Donc quand j'ai parlé aux plus petits, je leur ai demandé combien d'entre vous ici parlent Haida, c'est la langue maternelle de ces Indiens.
Every one of them did, and I said, how many of you know anything about whales?
Ils parlaient tous leur langue maternelle. Et quand je leur demandais combien d'entre vous connaissent des choses sur des baleines,
And of course, living up there, they all knew about whales, so we didn't have to say anything, we just listened.
et en fait, vivant là-bas avec des baleines pas loin, en fait, ils savaient plein de choses sur les baleines. En fait, on n'avait rien à leur dire, on avait juste à écouter.
And then we went to 16, 17-year-olds, and we said, how many people speak Haida?
Et ensuite, on a été voir les plus âgés, donc de 16-17 ans, et on leur a demandé combien d'entre vous parlent le haïda.
Not one of them. They had all forgotten their language.
Plus aucun d'entre eux ne le parlait, ils avaient tous oublié.
How many people know anything about whales?
Et combien d'entre vous savent des choses sur les baleines?
The attitude was, who cares?
Leur attitude, c'était, en fait, on s'en fout des baleines.
Had nothing to do with the reality of what's on MTV or, what Kim Kardashian was wearing that day, so they didn't really give a damn.
En fait, ça n'avait rien à voir avec ce qu'ils pouvaient voir sur MTV ou ce que Kim Kardashian portait ce jour-là. Moi, elle n'existait pas à l'époque. C'est un exemple très actuel.
So we had completely destroyed the intuitive understanding of these children.
Donc on avait complètement détruit la compréhension intuitive de ces enfants.
I always get criticized when people say, Watson, you just need to grow up.
Vous savez, on me critique souvent, on dit, mais Watson, t'as besoin de grandir en fait.
I'm 64 and I hope to hell I never grow up.
Moi j'ai 64 ans et j'espère bien que je grandirai jamais.
I had a question about the film in 2006 that you made with Rob Stewart, Sharkwater. I wanted to know, how did you live through that experience and how was it for you?
Je traduis la question peut-être pour ceux qui n'ont pas compris. Your question is how did he experience?
Yes.
Donc il parle du film Sharkwater, les seigneurs de la mer sur les requins. Et donc il demande à Paul comment est-ce qu'il a vécu le tournage de ce film. How did he experience that?
How did he experience it? How was the day-to-day time? How did he feel through it?
How did he feel?
During
You mean you want him to explain how the footage went?
just like how the experience was of it, like how.
Well, it's easy. You just jump in the water and swim with the sharks.
En fait, vous sautez à l'eau et vous nagez avec les requins. Was that a question?
We actually didn't touch on the issue of sharks, but sharks are one of the most important species in the ocean.
C'est un sujet très, très important, effectivement, les requins, parce que c'est une des espèces les plus importantes de la planète.
But people tend to be afraid of them, and for no real reason, because they're not as dangerous as people think they are.
Les gens ont tendance à tort d'avoir peur d'eux, à tort parce qu'en fait ils sont loin d'être aussi dangereux qu'on le croit.
The average number of people killed by sharks every year is between 5 and 6.
Les requins tuent en moyenne 5 à 6 personnes par an.
And when you consider that there are hundreds of millions of people go into the ocean, that's a pretty small percentage.
Et quand vous pensez au fait qu'il y a des centaines de millions de personnes qui vont dans l'océan chaque année, en fait c'est un pourcentage assez faible.
The average, the number of people killed on golf courses every year, struck by lightning or bitten by bees and die, is far, far greater.
En fait, il y a plus de gens qui meurent chaque année frappés par la foudre en jouant au golf, ou tués par des abeilles ou des autruches, ou des distributeurs de soda aussi.
So it takes more courage to go golfing than it does to go surfing or scuba diving.
Donc en fait, il faut plus de courage pour aller jouer au golf qu'il n'en faut pour aller surfer ou faire de la PVT.
We, on the other hand, kill 90 million sharks every year, so you have to say who's the monster.
Nous, par contre, on tue 90 millions de requins chaque année, donc il faut se poser la question, qui est vraiment le monstre?
They're fascinating creatures, and one of our crew members, Maddie Stewart, she's been swimming with sharks since she was 12 years old.
Une de nos membres d'équipage, qui s'appelle Maddie Stewart, a nagé avec les requins depuis qu'elle avait 12 ans, elle en a 20 aujourd'hui.
She's 20 now, and she's produced a film called Shark Girl, and she's swum with all species of sharks, which illustrates that they're valuable and they're not as dangerous as people think they are.
Donc elle vient de terminer un film qui s'appelle Shark Girl et elle a nagé avec toutes les espèces de requins, ce qui montre bien qu'ils ne sont pas aussi dangereux qu'on croit.
You just need a little education and keep in mind the fact that when you go into the shark's home, you're in the shark's home and you have to behave yourself.
En fait, il faut juste un peu d'éducation et surtout comprendre que quand vous allez dans l'océan, vous êtes chez le requin et c'est à vous de savoir vous comporter.
No, but what happens is that where the most shark attacks do happen is in areas where they kill sharks in order to try and protect people from sharks.
Non, en fait, ce qui se passe, c'est que là où il y a le plus d'attaques de requins, c'est les endroits où il y a de la pêche aux requins dans le but d'empêcher les attaques de requins.
The three most dangerous places would be La Reunion, Queensland, and Western Australia.
Les 3 endroits les plus dangereux au monde, c'est La Réunion, Queensland et l'ouest de l'Australie.
You see, sharks are territorial, and when you begin killing them, it attracts other sharks into that area.
En fait, les requins sont des animaux très territoriaux et quand vous les tuez, vous créez un vide qui attire de nouveaux requins sur la zone.
And the newcomers are more aggressive than the ones that have been there.
Et les nouveaux arrivants sont encore plus agressifs que ceux qui étaient déjà sur place.
The attacks in these places are really the responsibility of the humans who are killing these sharks and creating this unnatural situation.
En fait, les attaques dans ces régions sont vraiment empirées par les actions humaines qui essayent de les enrayer.
A couple of weeks ago, we received a letter from the mother of a 13-year-old girl who was killed by a shark in La Reunion.
Il y a quelques semaines, on a reçu une lettre de la maman d'une jeune fille de 13 ans qui a été tuée à La Réunion en février par un requin.
And she was angry that they were using her daughter as an excuse to get revenge on the sharks.
Et elle était en colère qu'on utilise la mort de sa fille comme prétexte pour tuer des requins.
Because in addition to what I also said, they're throwing fish guts into the water, sewage into the water, dead animals into the water, attracting these sharks.
Parce qu'il y a aussi des déversements de déchets, d'animaux morts, de boue fécale à proximité des zones de surf et de baignade qui attirent aussi les requins sur place.
Australia ships hundreds of thousands of cows and sheep every year to the Middle East.
L'Australie envoie par cargo des centaines de milliers de moutons et de vaches vers le Moyen-Orient chaque année.
These ships trail a constant stream of blood and feces and urine into the water, and the bodies that are thrown in attract even more sharks.
Et en fait, il y a beaucoup de sang, de carcasses, d'excréments qui sont balancés de ces cargos et qui attirent les requins.
But we also have to appreciate the role of the shark. The shark has molded evolution in the ocean for 450 million years. To remove the shark, it caused all sorts of ecological chaos.
Mais il faut aussi qu'on se rende compte du rôle primordial que jouent les requins. Ils ont façonné l'environnement marin pendant 450 millions d'années. Si vous retirez le requin, vous créez un chaos écologique.
And Kelly Slater, who's on our advisory board, his words of advice to surfers who are afraid of sharks is simple. Don't go in the water.
Et Kelly Slater, qui est multi-champion du monde de surf et qui fait partie du conseil de Sea Shepherd, a un conseil très simple pour les surfeurs. Si vous avez peur des requins, n'allez pas dans l'eau. Quels sont les métiers qui auront un impact important sur l'écologie? Je le dis au micro pour ceux qui sont dans le fond.
In our world, strangely enough, if you want to have an impact, you should be an actress or a musician.
Dans le monde dans lequel on vit, c'est assez étrange, mais en fait, si vous voulez avoir un impact, le mieux c'est d'être un acteur ou un musicien.
We live in a very strange world where the most credible people are people who make a living pretending to be somebody they're not.
On vit dans un monde très bizarre où, en fait, les gens qui ont le plus de crédibilité, c'est des gens qui gagnent leur vie en prétendant être ce qu'ils ne sont pas.
But seriously, there's also we need oceanographers, marine biologists, environmental design people, teachers, lawyers, writers, The thing is to use your abilities to serve the future.
Mais plus sérieusement, on a besoin de biologistes, d'écologistes, d'avocats, d'enseignants, d'écrivains. L'essentiel, en fait, c'est d'utiliser ce que vous faites le mieux, de mettre vos talents à profit de cette cause.
Et qu'est-ce que vous pensez qu'à l'échelle de nous, lycéens, de 17, 18 ans, un peu moins, on peut faire dans notre vie de tous les jours qui puisse contribuer à cette petite échelle, à aider l'environnement
Well, of course, people can make changes in their personal lifestyle, what you eat, what you buy.
Bon, bien sûr, les gens peuvent faire des choix importants dans leur mode de vie, choisir de réfléchir à ce qu'ils mangent, à ce qu'ils achètent.
But most importantly is to never feel that you can't make a difference.
Mais ce qui est plus important, c'est de ne jamais vous sentir impuissant, de jamais penser que vous ne pouvez pas faire de différence.
In whatever discipline you choose, the problem in our society is people tend to feel they're helpless.
Quelle que soit la discipline que vous ayez choisie, le problème dans nos sociétés, c'est que les gens ont tendance à croire qu'ils sont démunis.
Each and every one of us has a potential to change things. All we have to do is to have the courage in order to do it.
Absolument chacun d'entre nous a le potentiel pour changer les choses. Ce qu'il faut, c'est avoir le courage, l'imagination de le faire.
And one of the first things I advise is to just take any criticism and just toss it in the garbage can beside you, because criticism is meaningless.
Et un autre conseil que je peux vous donner, c'est que toutes les critiques qu'on peut vous faire, c'est de les foutre à la poubelle, parce qu'en fait, elles ne devraient avoir aucun impact sur vous, elles n'ont pas de sens.
So people will say, oh, you can't do that, that's impossible to do, you're just wasting your time. You follow your own dreams and you build on them and ignore everybody else.
Donc tous ceux qui vous disent vous pouvez pas faire ça, c'est impossible, c'est pas jouable, vous n'y arriverez pas, c'est trop difficile. Suivez votre chemin et suivez vos rêves. Peut-être qu'on a peut-être pour une toute dernière question. Oui.
Pourquoi est-ce que Greenpeace sont confiés avec Sea Shavers et pourquoi est-ce qu'il est plus activiste?
Ah, comme dernière question, ça c'est...
All of the big organizations are in conflict with anybody who's actually saying and doing things they don't want to be seen done.
En fait, toutes les grandes organisations sont en conflit avec ceux qui font des choses et disent des choses qu'ils ne veulent pas voir, qu'ils ne veulent pas entendre ou voir faire.
There's a movie just released called Cowspiracy by two 19-year-olds who were wondering why they had to take short showers to conserve water when one hamburger takes 800 liters to make.
Il y a un film qui s'appelle Cowspiracy qui vient d'être réalisé par deux jeunes Californiens de 19 ans qui en fait se demandaient pourquoi est-ce qu'on leur demande de prendre des douches plus courtes pour économiser l'eau potable alors qu'il faut 1300 litres pour faire un hamburger.
So they went to all the big environmental organizations like Greenpeace, Oceana and others and said, well, why is that?
Donc ils sont allés voir toutes les grandes organisations environnementales comme Greenpeace, Oceana et ils leur ont posé la question.
Greenpeace refused to be interviewed. The other organization said, well, we don't want to discuss that.
Greenpeace a refusé d'être interviewé et les autres organisations ont dit que c'était un sujet qu'elles ne voulaient pas aborder.
You see, these organizations depend upon donations, and Greenpeace brings in 450 million euros a year.
Ces grosses organisations dépendent des donations et une organisation comme Greenpeace reçoit 450 millions de dollars de donations par an.
Which means they want to be all things to all people and they don't want to upset anybody because that upsets their donation.
Ce qui veut dire qu'ils veulent être tout pour tout le monde et ne froisser personne parce que ça diminuerait le nombre de leurs donations.
And we're a much smaller organization. We don't even invest any money into fundraising, and therefore we can say, we're free to say what needs to be said.
Nous, on est une organisation beaucoup plus petite, on n'investit même pas dans la collecte de fonds, et donc ça nous donne la liberté de parole de dire ce qu'on a envie de dire.
Because to me, an environmentalist has to say things that need to be said that no one wants to hear and do things that people don't want to see being done.
Parce qu'être un écologiste, c'est aussi de dire des choses que les gens n'ont pas envie d'entendre, c'est de faire des choses que les gens n'ont pas envie de voir. Voilà.
Like I said, people all want change, and all these groups say we need to change, but none of them are willing to change.
Comme j'ai dit, les gens veulent voir du changement, mais ils ne veulent pas changer, et ces grands groupes ne sont pas vraiment dans le changement.
The strength of this environmental movement is not in these big organizations. There's 3 million registered environmental organizations in the world. That is the environmental movement, not the big organizations.
La force de ce mouvement, c'est pas ces énormes organisations qui ont pignon sur rue, c'est les 3 millions de petites associations environnementales qui travaillent au niveau local et qui sont beaucoup plus efficaces. La vraie force du mouvement, elle est là.
And when we talk about courage, here's a statistic that not many people are aware of because it doesn't get in the papers, but over the last 10 years, 950 environmentalists worldwide have been murdered.
Et en parlant de courage, voilà une statistique dont on n'entend pas beaucoup parler dans les médias, c'est sur les 10 dernières années, plus de 950 écologistes ont été assassinés.
They're not members of big organizations. Just in the last week alone, one ranger in Nigeria killed, an Australian conservationist in Zimbabwe killed, another conservationist in Costa Rica killed. It happens every week, but nobody hears about it because they're not members of these big organizations.
Et ces écologistes ne font pas partie de ces grands groupes environnementaux. Rien que sur la semaine dernière, il y a 3 écologistes qui ont été tués au Nigeria, au Zimbabwe, et le 3e pays, je ne sais plus. On n'en entend pas parler parce qu'ils ne font pas partie de ces gros groupes.
So when Greenpeace says they're risking their lives to protect the environment, not really. The people who are the unspoken people, the real heroes that nobody hears about.
Donc quand Greenpeace dit qu'ils prennent des risques qui risquent leur vie pour l'environnement, pas vraiment. En fait, les vrais héros, ce sont des gens qui sont inconnus, dont personne n'entend parler.
But they are good at hanging banners. They do that well.
Mais ils sont bons à brandir des banderoles, ça, ils le font très bien. Bon, ben, Paul doit partir, donc on va terminer là-dessus. Merci à tous.
There was a storm in Cannes, so we had to move the boat up the coast and get off in the rough waves and the water and rain. So that's the reason. So thank you for the nice welcome. Can everybody hear me? So this is my wife, Yana. She's with me. So where to begin? The Sea Shepherd Conservation Society is a rather unique organization. I set it up many years ago in 1977 with the objective of intervening to protect life in our oceans. They produce 80% of the oxygen that you breathe. And if we lose phytoplankton, it's going to be a very serious situation. And since 1950, plankton populations have been diminished by 40%. 40%. And why is that? Because we're upsetting the balance within the oceans. Humans take fish out of the oceans, and we put in a lot of toxic chemicals and sewage and plastic, which is a major problem. But we're not really contributing to the health of that ecosystem. The animals that live there, though, have been contributing and keeping it in balance now for millions and millions of years. The whales have been so brutally reduced over the last couple of hundred years that they're now less than 10% of their original populations. 300,000 blue whales were killed in the 20th century. And why does that make a difference? One blue whale every day eats somewhere in the area of 30, 40 tons of plankton. And they produce every day 3 tons of whale poo. Now, why is that important? Because that whale poo is rich in nitrogen and it's rich in iron, and that is the food of the phytoplankton. So the whales produce the food for the plants, which feed the zooplankton, the tiny little organisms that the whales eat. And therefore, for millions of years, it's a cycle that has worked perfectly. They actually produce their own food, somewhat like farmers, really. But they do it in a natural way that has worked perfectly for millions of years. So when you reduce the whale populations, you now reduce the amount of nitrogen and iron that is being put into the ecosystem. Now, the other thing that happens is that the zooplankton, they have tiny shells, like you see on shrimps and various animals. Those shells, when they die, those shells absorb calcium and carbon, and when they die, they settle to the bottom. Therefore, they're a carbon sink. They take the carbon to the bottom of the ocean with them. And over the years, that carbon is stored under pressure, and we now see it today as coal and oil. Coal and oil used to be living things, carbon which has been sequestered. What we're doing every year is releasing the equivalent of 100,000 years of carbon that has been stored in these banks. And this is what is giving rise to carbon levels, and which of course is causing climate change. Over the history of the planet, there's been 5 major environmental or ecological disasters called mass extinctions, where entire populations of the planet's biodiversity have simply crashed. The last time this happened was 65.2 million years ago, when a large meteor hit the Earth, causing the catastrophic conditions which led to the extinction of the dinosaurs. Dinosaurs were actually a pretty successful group of animals. They survived for hundreds of millions of years. And the thing about major extinction events is it takes the planet 18 to 20 million years to recover from one of them. And of course, we've recovered because it was 65 million years ago. But right now, we're in the middle of what scientists now call the Anthropocene, which means it's the 6th major extinction event in the history of the planet. And why it's called the Anthropocene is we, humans, are responsible for it. We will lose more species of plants and animals between the year 2000 and the year 2065 than we've lost over the last 65 million years. So that means that there's going to be serious implications to your future, unless we can turn this around. This year, we have a conference in Paris on climate change, and hopefully, some of the world's leaders will actually get to understanding the importance of actually addressing this. I attended the United Nations Conference on Environment in 1972 in Sweden, and I attended it again in 1992 in Brazil. And both those conferences, they made a lot of promises, and they said they were going to do a lot of things, but they haven't done a single thing that they said they would do. Because governments like to attend these conferences, but when it comes to actually implementing the solutions, they don't want to pay the price. You see, everybody wants change, but the problem is nobody really wants to change. So when I set up Sea Shepherd, it was to give the opportunity for people to get directly involved, to actually participate. We've had over 5,000 people volunteer on our ships over the last 37 years. They get right into the field, and it's an incredible sense of satisfaction that you can go and get involved, and because you were there, thousands of whales continue to be alive. Tens of thousands of sea turtles continue to swim in the oceans. And that's what we do. But we can't do it ourselves, so what we hope to do is set an example because the strength of any movement has to lie in diversity, the same way the strength of any ecosystem lies in diversity. So whether your approach is education or litigation or art or music or whatever you do, if you make sure that you contribute some of your skills and abilities to making this a better world for tomorrow, then things can change. You know, sometimes it seems a little overwhelming when you look at all of the obstacles in our way, all the bureaucracy and the corporations that are trying to make as much money and destroy as much as possible. And a lot of times people say to me, oh, well, we can't do anything. It's absolutely impossible. But what I've learned over the years is that the impossible can become possible simply through persistence and through the application of courage and imagination and, most importantly, passion. Passion to get things done and to do things. You know, way back in 1972, I wrote an article about a man in jail in Africa. And I wrote about his struggles, and I couldn't get the article published because none of the major newspapers or magazines would publish an article about a man who was called a terrorist. We don't deal with that. I managed to get it published in some of the small things, but not in the big ones. Back in 1972, the very idea that Nelson Mandela would become president of South Africa was unthinkable and impossible. And yet, he became president of South Africa. So that's why I believe that the impossible can become possible. And what we're seeing now is a growing awareness in the world of how solutions can be found. When we come to climate change, the solutions are there, except people don't really want to address them. 2 years ago, a couple of 19-year-old guys from California decided to make a movie. And they said, well, you know, all the environmental groups are asking us to take short showers because we need to conserve water, and therefore, you know, that's our contribution to making this, you know, to the environment. But they said, why do I have to take a short shower when one hamburger takes 800 liters of water to produce? In other words, almost a month's worth of showers for one hamburger. So they went to all of the major environmental groups with a question, and in front of the camera, and that was saying, why don't you address the real reason for these problems? The transportation industry, that is airplanes, buses, cars, and everything, produce 13% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. The agro industry, especially the production of meat on factory farms and chickens and cows and pigs, produces 51% of those emissions. Yet, people don't want to talk about that. And when he went to the big organizations, groups like Greenpeace refused to be interviewed. Other groups like Oceana said, well, we disagree, you know. And then, but finally they went to the California government Water Conservancy, and the scientists there said, yes, you're right, but we can't talk about that. And they said, well, why? Because nobody wants to hear it. They don't want us to tell them how to change their behavior. And he was saying, well, they're telling me to take a short shower. So isn't that changing my behavior? He said, well, people just don't want to hear that they shouldn't eat hamburgers. 40% of all of the fish taken out of our ocean is fed not to people, but to pigs, chickens, fur-bearing animals, and domestic house cats, and also to domestic fish like salmon. It takes 70 fish caught in the ocean to raise one fish on a salmon farm. We now live in a world where domestic house cats are eating more fish than all the world's seals. And seal populations are diminishing, and there's no shortage of cats. It's estimated that there's about 1 billion of them on the planet. We're all now living in a world where chickens on factory farms eat more fish than all the world's albatross and puffins put together. It's a very unnatural situation. If we're going to really address the problems, what we need to do is increase diversity in the oceans. We have to bring back more whales, more seals, more seabirds, because of their contribution to that ecosystem. Now, fishermen have the opinion that we have to kill the seals and we have to kill the dolphins because they eat the fish, and that's a very simplistic way of looking at it. Yes, they do eat the fish, but what they take out, they put more back in. And when Jacques Cartier set sail from Saint-Malo, France in 1534, there were 45 million seals in the North Atlantic and no shortage of fish. Not only were there 45 million seals, there was also species that are no longer with us that we drove to extinction. The sea mink, the walrus, which once existed in the North Atlantic, the Atlantic gray whale, all gone. The giant auk, the northern penguin, gone. We've wiped them out. But with those species there and all the ones that they had, no shortage of fish, because nature knows how to take care of this planet if all the species live in accordance with the laws of ecology. And that's all we really have to know, is there's 3 laws of ecology. The first, the law of diversity, that the strength of an ecosystem is dependent upon diversity within it. The greater the diversity, the stronger the ecosystem. The Amazonian jungle is a stronger ecosystem than the boreal forests of northern Canada, for example. The second is the law of interdependence, that all of these species are dependent upon each other. And actually, some of them are a lot more important than we are. You know, a couple of years ago, I was severely criticized because I said that worms were more important than people. And I was on the Fox network in the US, and they said, how dare you, how could you say such a horrible thing, that worms are more important than people? And I answered, well, I said that worms are more important than people because worms are more important than people. And the reason being is that worms can live on planet Earth without us, but we can't live without them. We need bees, they don't need us. We need trees, they don't need us. We need fish, they don't need us. If these species go, we go with them. And that's the point that I'm trying to get across. Ecologically, they are far more important than we are. And the third law of ecology is the law of finite resources, the limits to growth, limits to carrying capacity. And right now, the reason we have such mass extinction is we're stealing the carrying capacity of other species, driving them into extinction so our numbers can increase. The year I was born, there were 3 billion people on planet Earth. Now there's 7.5 billion people on planet Earth. That has more than doubled in just my lifetime. So you can imagine what is going to be in the next 60 years or by the end of this century. The numbers are going to continue to double. And that's called exponential growth, and they would like us to think that there's going to be scientific solutions to it. One of the ones I always hear, oh, that's okay, we'll just go off in spaceships and colonize other planets. Of course, we haven't found any other planets to colonize, but if you were to put, let's say, 100,000 people a day into spaceships and send them up into space somewhere, it still would not keep up with the number of people that are born every day. So, and that's a completely unfeasible sort of solution. The other thing that we can do is learn from the intelligent species that are on this planet. We tend to think we're the only intelligent species on the planet. And that's because we define intelligence by the ability to make tools. If a piece of protoplasm steps out of a spaceship with a ray gun, oh, automatically we know it's intelligent because it's got a ray gun and it came out of a spaceship, it has technology. But what about intelligences that don't require technology because they're perfectly suited to the environment they live in? Elephants, whales, dolphins. They don't need to have clothing, they don't need telephones. Whales can communicate with each other over hundreds of miles, except that they're blocked now because of all the noise pollution in the water. But in fact, blue whales have been known to communicate over 1,000 kilometers with each other underwater. Their abilities to communicate far exceed ours. You know, when I was in University Biology 101, they used to stick a picture up on the board of a rat's brain. And beside it, they would put a dog's brain, and then beside that, a chimpanzee brain, and then the human brain. And the professor would say, you can see by the increasing size of the brain and the increasing complexity of the brains and the convolutions on the neocortex area that dogs are smarter than rats, and chimps are smarter than dogs, and humans are smarter than chimps, and it's right there and you can see it. But they never, ever put an orca or dolphin or whale brain up there because it really makes us look very stupid. And we as humans don't like to be look stupid, so we just keep that brain off the picture. The average human brain is 1,300 cubic centimeters. The average orca, the largest member of the dolphin family, is 6,000 cubic centimeters. And the largest brain to have ever evolved on the planet is the sperm whale brain, the cachalot, which has a 9,000 cubic centimeter brain. Big brains mean something. And they say, well, they're big animals. Well, dolphins are not that much bigger than we are. But the fact is that dinosaurs were big with brains the size of walnuts. So, big brains mean everything. But the other big difference is that humans, or all mammals, have 3-lobe brains. 3 lobes. The only exception on this planet are cetaceans, whales and dolphins. 4-lobe brains. That's a very complex brain, and that 4th lobe is almost all associative behavior, meaning they can think, they can feel, and they can communicate. And they can communicate like we cannot even imagine. Their brains can send out information in short bursts, almost like our computers that can talk to each other. In fact, they can even translate visual images to each other because of their incredible ability and sonar abilities. If I'm a dolphin and I'm looking at you right now, I don't just see the surface of you, I see your heart beating, I see the blood moving through your body. I can see if you're, if you're in a state of distress. This is one of the reasons that dolphins rescue people who are drowning, because they can actually see into the lungs. They can see the water and they know what the problem is and they come to the rescue. So these are creatures that see with their ears, whales and dolphins. And what we're doing, we're putting so much noise into the ocean. Everything from fracking to sonic testing and everything. It's an incredibly unsettling experience for cetaceans. And then what do? We capture them and we stick them into little concrete pools for our amusement and tell everybody that it's education. No orca has ever killed a human being in the entire history of human relationships with whales. There's never been a person killed by an orca until Tilikum killed 3 people. And why? Because Tilikum was in prison, in a concrete pool, driven to complete craziness by the fact of that isolation. Whales do not kill people, but when you frustrate the animal enough, you can do it. Elephants. 1978, I spent 6 months tracking elephant poachers in Kenya. And I said at the time that by 1990, the population be reduced to 65% of what it was then. How could you even say that it would be reduced to 65%? Well, by 1990, it had been reduced to 45%. So, nobody wants to really believe what's happening. In the environmental movement now, the real movement, there's 3 million registered environmental organizations around the world, and these are the people who are making a difference, but you never hear about them. There are Indians in the Amazon, people fighting on the ground. Over the last 10 years, nearly 1,000 environmentalists have been murdered. Just in the last week, there was a ranger killed in Nigeria, a conservationist killed in Zimbabwe, an environmentalist killed in Costa Rica. You never hear about it because, that's the stuff that doesn't get into the media. Which brings us to another question. A major source of pollution, media. The media is polluted. And one of the reasons when we set up Greenpeace back in the 70s, the reason it became such a big organization, it was the first environmental organization to understand the power of media, the fact that we lived in a media culture. And therefore, to get our message across, we had to use the media, the same way politicians and Coca-Cola use the media. Because see, the media, there's only 4 elements of media. Newspapers, television, radio, film, they're not there to give you information. They're there to sell products. And the information that they convey is just getting your attention. So if you want to get a message across, you need to understand how the media works. So if you're to say, well, the whales are being killed and we're going to lose all the whales, or we're going to lose all the elephants, nobody's interested. But if you can dramatize the story, then they become interested. A couple of examples for me is in 1977, to focus attention on the slaughter of seals in Canada, I drafted Bridget Bardot to come out to the ice. Her picture, cheek to cheek with a baby seal, guaranteed us the covers of all the world's major magazines. They can't resist that. The best example is when I led a campaign to stop the killing of wolves in the Yukon in northern Canada. Because the 4 elements of media are this: sex, scandal, violence, and celebrity. Every story has one of those elements. And if you have more than one of those elements, you have a bigger story. And if you have all 4 elements, you have the super story. And you can carry it. So we carried the wolf hunt story for 2 solid weeks in the headlines of Canada by giving them all 4 elements. The threat to kill us if we intervened, the actual shooting of wolves from helicopters, that covered the violence thing pretty well. Then we caught a politician taking bribes from a big game hunting organization, and therefore we had the scandal, violence. How could I get all the 4 elements? I recruited Bo Derek as our spokesperson for the campaign. And at the press conference, one of the journalists said, "Oh, come on now. What does Bo Derek know about wolves?" I said, "Well, that's not the point. You make the rules. We play the game. And if I had the best wolf biologist in the world, Dr. Gordon Haver, Dr. David Meck, the place would be an empty room. Nobody would be reporting on the story. But because she is our spokesperson, I see there's 16 TV cameras here, and it will be the front page story of your newspaper tomorrow, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can dictate the placement of your story if you can control the 4 elements." So this is one of the reasons that a lot of organizations use these kind of gimmicks to get their message across. And when people say, "Oh, you're just manipulating the media," yes, we are. The media is there to be manipulated if you're smart enough to manipulate it. Coca-Cola does it. Anybody running for a political office does it. So if you don't do it, nobody's going to pay attention to what you're doing. And what that has evolved in is to a media culture where people are forced to do dramatic things. Unfortunately, a lot of those dramatic things are violent, which has led to the emergence of terrorism as we know it on the planet. Because terrorism exists because it gets people's attention. And that's the darker side of this whole thing. Because it's very difficult to educate without the media. One of the things that I learned a long time ago was from an ancient Japanese strategist named Miyamoto Musashi, who said that he wrote The Twofold Way of Pen and Sword. That what's the point of a confrontation unless you educate people as to why you're doing it? So I've translated that today into the twofold way of camera and confrontation. So when we go into battle, it's with cameras, lots of cameras. To get into the mainstream consciousness, I decided 10 years ago we needed a television show because people like television. And so I went to all of the networks and I said, the biggest show on Discovery right now is a bunch of guys going out fishing and catching crabs called The Deadliest Catch. I'll give you men and women going to more remote places and more dangerous places to save whales. It's got to be more compelling than catching crabs every week. That led to the creation of Whale Wars, and that has given us a terrific clout. So last year, the International Court of Justice ruled that Japanese whaling was illegal, as we've said it all along, and we've been able to win these battles. Yesterday, a big milestone happened, and that is that the killing of dolphins in Taiji. Every year now since 2003, we've been on the ground trying to fight this, and we're restricted because it's inside Japan. We can't physically stop them, but what we did do was to bring the camera there every single day. So from September 1st to March 1st every year, our Cove Guardians are on the ground witnessing, documenting, and live streaming everything that's happening there and putting pressure on people where we can. We finally got the U.S. Ambassador to Japan, Carolyn Kennedy, to come out and make an announcement from it. But last month, the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums told the Japanese Association of Zoos and Aquariums, stop buying dolphins from Taiji. And you have 1 month in order to make that decision. And yesterday they made the decision. They are no longer going to buy dolphins from Taiji because the alternative was to be isolated from the world community on zoos and aquarium, and they made that choice. So it was a major victory, and hopefully it will lead to the end of that incredible massacre of dolphins. The way we slaughter species at sea would never be tolerated on land. You imagine taking a net that's 10 kilometers wide and dragging it across the Serengeti and catching everything in it and killing it. That's pretty much what we do to our oceans. We go through one species after another, wipe it out, go on to the next one, go after another one. And in order to sell the fish, we come up with marketing names. Like, for instance, it used to be spider crabs. Nobody was going to eat a spider crab, so they renamed it the Alaska king crab. It used to be Antarctic and Patagonia toothfish, and then some marketing genius called it Chilean sea bass. And I have to say, Jan and I had a very interesting experience last night because we were invited to a very exclusive dinner in Cannes that was to support environmental causes. Very, very rich people and everything. And as we sat there, and they served Chilean sea bass, an endangered species. And we didn't eat it. And of course, there's a woman across the table said, well, why aren't you eating it? I said, well, this is an endangered species. Yes, but it tastes so good. Yes, but we're overfishing them. We're going to lose them. Oh, you really should try it. It tastes really good. So even at a dinner for environmental causes, you can't get the message across because people are fixated on doing what they've always wanted to do, which is we want to see change. They all wanted to see change, but they didn't want to change. One of the reasons that Sea Shepherd promotes vegetarianism and veganism, and all of our ships have been vegan vessels for over 10 years, 15 years actually, is because we feel you cannot be an environmentalist unless you endorse veganism, which is to make the shallowest carbon print you can. And you have to lead by example. We don't really preach it, but what we do is we set by example. And people come on our ships and they can't even imagine that you can actually sustain yourself on a vegan diet. Everybody thinks you're going to waste away and die. I'm proof that you don't waste away and die. You can eat, you can have a vegan diet and it's perfectly healthy. But we've been so ingrained into, eating meat and fish. And the problem is, of course, that not only is it bad for the environment, it's bad for your health. Fish especially is now polluted with heavy metals, mercury, lead, arsenic, PCBs. In the United States, if you buy a can of tuna fish, it has a warning on the label. It says not to be eaten by children or pregnant women. I'm going, what, with the rest of us? You can poison the rest of us, but you don't want to save the children and the pregnant women. So it's like, it's all comes down to, again, trying to market it. Now, many people realize that to eat tuna, you have to contribute to the killing of dolphins, because one of the ways of fishing on tuna is to surround entire pods of dolphins, catch them all in the net, kill the dolphins, and keep the tuna. We have reduced the fish in our oceans by 90% since 1950. The reason you still get fish is because of massive subsidies given by governments to the fisheries to go out. And those subsidies are spent on incredibly complex technologies to extract less and less fish. Now we see fishing boats worth 100 million euros heading out into the ocean, some even more expensive than that. They fish with nets that are sometimes 100 kilometers long. They fish with long lines that are 100 kilometers long or more. They use vacuum cleaners to vacuum the fish right out of the oceans. They use bottom trawlers to scrape the bottom, destroying all the coral and the habitat when they're doing this. It's the single most destructive industry on this planet, and yet people don't want to question it. The other thing too is we say, well, people have to eat. What about the poor fishermen? What about the poor fishermen? 1 million Indian fishermen have been driven into poverty by the giant corporate fishing operations. The Norwegian trawler fleet alone wiped out the fish off the coast of India, sending 1 million people into poverty. Why are there pirates in Somalia? Because the real pirates came into those waters and took everything, the European and Asian fishing fleets. And they're doing the same now in West Africa, so very soon you're going to see the emergence of piracy in Mauritania and Senegal, and the reason for that is people driven into desperation through poverty. And that poverty is being caused by people from foreign nations coming to their waters and taking everything that they can. Jacques Cousteau once said that if the navies of the world had any sense of moral responsibility, they would be out protecting the oceans instead of playing their silly little war games with each other. I've addressed the French Senate and I've addressed the French Navy, and they agree. A lot of the officers in the French Navy have said, yes, we should do that. But our hands are tied. We only can do what the government tells us we can do. Navies can make a real contribution by going out there and stopping all these poachers. What we did over the last 6 months is something that all the governments of the world were unable to achieve over the last 20 years. Toothfish poaching in the Southern Ocean, in Antarctica. There were 6 notorious vessels. We called them the Bandit 6. And every year everybody knew they were there. but Australia did nothing. New Zealand did nothing. They're all listed on the Interpol purple list as criminal fishing operations, but nobody did anything. So this last year we decided to do something. We sent our vessels, the Bob Barker and the Sam Simon, down off the coast of Antarctica, and as luck would have it, the first vessel we found was the most notorious one of all, called the Thunder, and we began to chase it. The Bob Barker chased it for 110 days, from Antarctica across the Indian Ocean, up the South Atlantic, all the way to the equator off the islands of the nation of San Tome. They couldn't run anywhere. They couldn't go anywhere, because anywhere they went, we would turn them in to the authorities. Because what these ships do is they sneak into ports under different names and different flags, and that's how they smuggle their contraband. So the Thunder, without no place to go, right in front of us, they sank their own ship. And we rescued the 40 crew that on board. And what we found is that most of those crew, 30 of those foreign crew, were virtual slaves, Indonesians who have been, put into forced labor on these vessels. We turned all 40 of them over to the San Tome officials. They're still being detained 2 months later, and it's an ongoing investigation. Meanwhile, the net that they set, the Sam Simon, our other vessel, confiscated 72 kilometers of that net. It's just last week was unloaded in Germany, and we'll be turning that net into running shoes, we'll recycle it into shoes. It'll never catch any fish again. And in fact, what we're calling it is the Thunder Down Under shoes, and people will be able to buy shoes made from recycled illegal gill nets. But we also intercepted the other vessels, and because of our interceptions and our documentations of their illegal activities, the Kunlun was seized by the government of Thailand. The Viking and the Furlong were seized by the government of Malaysia. And 2 others we just discovered in the last 2 days are in the process of being seized by the government in Cape Verde. So what we were able to do as a non-government organization with volunteers was to shut down every single illegal toothfish operation in the Southern Ocean. And it's interesting that the New Zealand Navy did encounter 2 of these vessels this summer because they were being embarrassed that we were doing it, and they didn't. So they came up alongside and demanded to board the vessel called the Kunlun. And the captain of the Kunlun said no, just ignored them and kept fishing. And what did the New Zealand Navy do? They went home. And the head of the New Zealand Navy was called before a parliamentary committee, and he said, why couldn't you do anything? Well, we couldn't board it because they wouldn't let us board. You're the Navy. Yeah, I know, but somebody could have gotten hurt. We couldn't board it. And then the parliamentarian says, well, Sea Shepherd was able to stop them. How come you couldn't stop them? And we probably got the greatest compliment of our life when the admiral of the New Zealand Navy said to the parliament, he said, with all respect, sir, we're not Sea Shepherd. We're not pirates. And if you go back to piracy, the days of piracy in the Caribbean in the 17th century, it wasn't the British Navy that shut down the pirates in the Caribbean. It was Henry Morgan. He was a pirate. You want pirates, you get pirates to do it. Because pirates get things done. Governments don't seem to be able to get much done at all. It usually cause the problems. And people say, yeah, but they were bad people, these pirates. But really, when you look at it, were they? The pirates in the Caribbean, the 17th century, they were the first people to raid slave ships and free the slaves. And slaves who were freed from those vessels could join the vessels and rise to the level of their competence. The first time that had ever been done in history, where a black African could rise to be a captain of a pirate ship when he had been freed as a slave based on his ability alone, and that could happen during the 17th and 16th centuries. That was the time when the British Navy and the American Navy later were in fact defending the slaving vessels. And people say, yeah, but they stole things. They stole gold. Yes, they did. They stole gold that the Spanish had stolen from the Indians of Mesoamerica. So in other words, how come the Spanish are okay when they steal things, but the pirates are not? So we get called pirates because we intervene against illegal activities. Years ago, when they started calling us pirates, I said, okay, you want us to be pirates? We'll be pirates, and we'll be proud of it. So we got our own Jolly Roger flag, and people seem to like it. But we have an unblemished record. In our entire history, we've never caused a single injury to a single person, because what we do is what we call aggressive nonviolence. We're aggressive, we're nonviolent. Back in 1985, I had a Tibetan Buddhist monk came to me and he gave me a little statue about the size of this bottle, and it was a horse-headed animal with dragon wings, and he said, "I've been asked to give this to you." And I said, "Well, what is it?" He says, "I don't know, I've just been asked to give it to you." Wouldn't explain it, but you know, when a Tibetan Buddhist monk comes along and said, "You want to put this up on your mask?" Why not? It's harmless, so I did. And I had it up there for a number of years until 1989, when I had the very great opportunity to have lunch with and talk with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And I showed him a picture of this, and I said, "What is this?" And he said, he found out he sent it to us. And I said, "Well, what is it?" He says, "It's called Hayagriva." Great, and what does that mean? He says, "Well, it's the symbol for the divine aspect of Buddha's wrath, Buddha's anger." I said, "Okay, what does that mean?" And he says, "Oh, well, you never want to hurt anybody. But sometimes, when they cannot see enlightenment, scare the hell out of them until they do." So he understood what we do is called aggressive non-violence. Our pirate flags, our black ships, our camouflage ships, all that we intimidate our opposition, but we don't hurt them. And that's why when we show up, they run, but when the New Zealand Navy shows up, they just continue doing their business as usual. And it also helps to when people make all these ridiculous accusations about us. And some of the ridiculous accusations about us are quite amusing, really, because the number of people that I have allegedly killed and shot at sea and vessels and everything like that is into the dozens. It's never happened once, but see, that works in our favor, because when people think that you've done that, they don't want to oppose you, so that's why they run from us when we show up. So we've given this aura, our reputation of being something we're not, and sometimes that reputation works very well indeed. So over the years, we've shut down whaling operations, poaching operations, shark finning operations. We've rescued turtles. One of the projects we're working with right now is we're in partnership with Pharrell Williams and his company Bionic Yarn to recycle plastic from the ocean. There's over 700 million tons of plastic in our oceans. These things right here end up in the ocean, most of them, and then when they do, they break down into tiny little particles through salt and sun, and that looks like plankton. Fish and birds eat it and it kills them. So it's a very, very difficult problem. And here's a good example of what we call adaptation to diminishment. As things get more and more diminished, people just adapt to it. Humans have a great ability to adapt. We, had a long history of adaptation. You run out of this, take that. Run out of this, take that. If this was the year 1965, and I were to say to you, in 40 years, 40, 50 years, you'd be buying your water in plastic bottles, and you're going to be paying more for that water than petrol or gasoline. You would have looked at me and said, "Right, nobody's going to buy water. Certainly not going to put it in a plastic bottle and sell it." I mean, that was an unthinkable thing in 1965. Last year I was in a hotel in New York, and there's a bottle this big. It's about a liter, I guess, and this is 1.5 liters, but it was a liter bottle, and it was $12 American. And I go, $12 American for a bottle of water? That's $48 a gallon. That's in a country where gasoline is $3.50 a gallon. How do we get conned into buying water at $48 a gallon? Again, it's all media and marketing. And that was in New York City, the city with the cleanest water in the world. That comes out of the tap because it comes from the Allegheny Mountains through stone tunnels right there. It's the cleanest drinking water in the world, and yet people don't drink that. They go to the store and buy a bottle of water because that's what we've been told we should do. And again, we adapt to diminishment, adapt to eating things that are not, for instance, they're not there anymore. The banana that you eat today is not the banana that was sold in the 40s and 50s. That banana was wiped out through blight caused by overproduction. And that banana tasted, 100 times better than the tasteless thing that you have today. But again, we've adapted to that diminishment. Go to the island of Galapagos, pick one of those bananas off the tree, and you will see the difference on that. But you can't market those bananas in the Galapagos because they're very difficult because they're wild. So you have to do the mass production of them, which is what we're doing, mass production of species. So we've gotten to the point where our entire population of the planet is dependent on only a handful of plant species, grains and different vegetables and things like this. And if anything happens to those, we're in serious trouble. Imagine a world where the grass family gets a blight and disappears. The grass family. That means all the grasses in the world. Rice, wheat, bamboo even. 10 years later, there won't be 7.5 billion people on the planet. They'd be lucky if there'd be 150 million. We will go extinct or severely, and people will be fighting over turnips and potatoes. That is how dependent we are upon all of these other species. So, you know, there used to be 600 species of apples, and they originally originated in Kazakhstan, and we brought them out and propagated them, and now they're all clones, really, and a very, very delicate balance to keep them that way. There used to be over 800 species of potatoes, but you don't see all those species. We brought them down and to where we could market. But we're all of those other species are going extinct. Same with corn, hundreds of species of corn. And again, we're losing so many of them. Just as we're losing cultural diversity, all of those cultures that we have removed from the planet. Biocentric cultures, that is, cultures that looked upon the earth in a different way than our anthropocentric cultures. Because what we do in our anthropocentric cultures is we say, this entire world revolves around us. We're number one and everything here was made for us. That's what our society thinks. A biocentric culture, that is the indigenous peoples of the Amazon or the peoples up in northern Canada, Greenland, whatever, their look on this is, we're part of this. We're all part of this, and what happens to one happens to another. And that is the attitude that we have to return to, the part that we are part of and not lord and master of. Because we're just simply deluding ourselves if we think that we can control this. Nature always, always has the final word. And this movement is not a movement to protect the earth. The earth will be here 15, 20, 30 million years from now. It'll be a beautiful place. We probably won't be here, but it'll be here. So this is not about saving the earth. The environmental conservation movement is about saving us from ourselves. So we are at war with ourselves. And so we have to decide which side are we on, the side of survival or the side of denial. Denying the problems or actually get involved in finding the solutions. Thank you.
When did you decide that you were going to do this association?
I was raised in a fishing village in eastern Canada, and when I was 10 years old, I spent the entire summer swimming with a family of beavers. And the next year when I went back, I couldn't find them. And I asked around and found out trappers had killed them all during the winter, and I got really angry. So when I was 11, I walked the trap lines during the winter, freeing the animals and destroying the traps. So that's how I got involved as an activist. And that led me to reading the works of Grey Owl, who in the 20s was defending beavers, Parley Mowat, who was defending wolves, and that sort of got me involved in those works. So in 1968, when we were opposing the detonation of nuclear bombs in the Aleutian Islands, I was the youngest founding member of a group called the Don't Make a Wave Committee, and that's the group that became in 1972 the Greenpeace Foundation. And what we did in 1971 was to take a vessel up to stand between, off of Amchitka Island where they were blowing up the bomb. They blew up the bomb anyway, it was underground. But we created such a controversy that was the last test that was ever made there. So it was a success in hindsight. At the time we thought it was a failure, but it was a success in hindsight. And then in 1974 we got involved with protecting whales and seals, and I left Greenpeace in 1977 because it became just too bureaucratic for me, and I set up Sea Shepherd, which I've never had any regrets with. And now, Sea Shepherd is a different kind of organization. We're not a large organization. We're a volunteer-driven organization, but we do have 9 ships, and we have no shortage of crew. It used to be hard to get crew, but now I've got about 2,000 crew applications on file and more people who want to come. Because anybody, see, with Greenpeace, you have to be a professional. Anybody can crew with Sea Shepherd. You just have to have a passion. That's what we're looking for, is a passion. And when people say, oh, well, you're asking young people to risk their lives to protect a whale, that's outrageous. And I said, really? We ask young people to go and risk their lives and die to protect property, oil wells, and religion. So why is it outrageous to ask somebody to risk their life to protect a species which needs protecting? I can't think of anything more noble than that because you intervened, a species is protected. As an example, David Wingate, he's a Bermudan biologist. That one man spent his life, devoted his life to saving the Bermuda storm petrel, the cowhawk, one species of bird. Nobody's ever heard of it, but David spent his life protecting it. That bird is alive today, exists today, because David spent his life protecting it. That to me is the most noble legacy you can actually leave. It's because you lived, an entire species was protected. People like Jane Goodall, people like Diane Fossey. These are the people who are right on the ground. Bruti Geldekos and her work with orangutans. These individual efforts have actually delivered more than all of the efforts of large organizations and governments.
How many days do you spend in sea before you have to refuel?
Well, that depends on the ships. The Bob Barker is our best ship. It was 140 days at sea on this last campaign. We were fortunate in buying the Bob Barker, a vessel, because it was originally built in 1950 as a Norwegian whaler, so it was fast, and it was ice strengthened, which are ideal. But then it was converted to being a supply vessel, a refueling vessel for the West African fishing fleet when we bought it. So it had giant fuel tanks. So we can take 600 tons of fuel on that boat. So actually we could stay at sea for half a year on that particular vessel. And also what we've done over the years, especially in the Southern Ocean, is we also have a ship that we devote to going back, getting fuel and refueling the vessels at sea. Our biggest expense for the organization, unfortunately, is fuel. And of course we get criticized, are you going to use fuel? Well, yeah, what are we not going to catch them with a sailing boat, you know. But we actually, when people say, well, you know, you're leaving a carbon footprint, we're actually reducing it because the ships we shut down will no longer burn fuel. So we're actually shutting down more ships than we actually are, which would use more fuel than the ones that we're using. And our vessel, the Martin Sheen, is a sailing vessel. It's now involved in the Sea of Cortez protecting the Vaquita. And our captain on that, by the way, is a French woman named Una Loyol. So she's our expedition leader and captain on board the Martin Sheen.
When you're on your ship, do you have enough food for everyone?
Well, actually, that's one of the advantages. One of the advantages of our ships being vegan vessels is you can pack a lot of dried everything from beans and rice and everything onto the ship. So we actually can stay at sea much longer. We don't have frozen meats and fish. You know, people were saying, well, when we pulled in, the crew spent 200 hours pulling in that 72 kilometers of gill net, and in that was some, 40 tons of toothfish. And all those fish were thrown back. They weren't eaten. And we got criticized that and said, well, why didn't you eat it? And I said, it was just a waste of fish. No, it wasn't a waste of fish. There's a lot of things in the ocean that can eat it. They're much more deserving of that fish than we are. So, we always have this idea that everything in the ocean belongs to us, and anything that eats that fish is a problem. Right now, for instance, last week there was a complete collapse of the herring fishery off the west coast of North America. And that has now led to everything from dolphins to sea lions washing up on the beach, dying. What we forget is that when we take fish out of the ocean, we're taking it out of the mouths of the animals that actually need it. Everything from the birds to the dolphins to the whales and the other fishes, of course. So we've completely disrupted that entire cycle there. The simple fact is you don't need to eat fish. And when it comes to the question of sharks, everybody seems to hate sharks. These monsters are going around killing people and everything. Sharks, on average, every year, kill 5 to 6 people. 5 to 6 people. It's more dangerous to play golf. More people die every year on the golf course bitten by allergic reactions to bees, or they get struck by lightning. So all these surfers are moaning in La Reunion about, oh my God, you got to kill the sharks so we can go surf. Kelly Slater, the world's greatest surfer, who sits on our advisory board, has a word for them. If you're afraid of sharks, then stay out of the water. Well, you guys are wimpier than the golfers. Golfers aren't complaining about the lightning; they go out and play golf. So stop complaining about the sharks and go out and surf. But here's the interesting thing about, again, what's happening. Where the greatest shark attacks take place? La Reunion, Queensland, Australia, and Western Australia. The 3 places where they have shark kill programs. Because they go out and they kill the sharks, and then they wonder why there are more shark attacks. And the reason being is that when you kill sharks, which are very territorial, you create a vacuum. which brings in new sharks. And those new sharks are very territorial, they're very aggressive. So you're actually encouraging aggression within the sharks by killing sharks. Leave the sharks alone and they will leave us alone. That is the solution. But the French government has just given quite a few $1 million to La Réunion to kill more sharks, because the people in La Réunion who want to swim with sharks say we've got to kill more sharks. But my prediction, there will be even more shark attacks next year because of this very, very ignorant policy of killing sharks. Yes?
Can we see... Oh, sorry.
That's nice and loud so we can all hear.
Can we students of Collège Mignet do anything to stop this massacre?
Well, everybody can do something, you know. Every individual has the capacity to make a difference, and that's the message that we try to get across. Back in 1979, I had a 19-year-old crew member on our ship, and he came to me and said, what are we going to do about the way they're treating chimpanzees in laboratories? And I said, well, Alex, Sea Shepherd's not going to do anything because we've got ships and we're not going into the laboratory, but why don't you do something? He said, well, what can I do? I said, you got a thing called imagination. Use it. And you've obviously got the passion, so use it. And what did Alex do? He went back to the US, he got a job in a laboratory in Maryland, spent an entire year in there and documented everything that was going on, the abuse, the cruelty. He then took all of that documentation to the Washington Post and ABC television, and not only exposed it, he got the place shut down, and from that he organized his own organization called the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, PETA. That came from one person realizing that they can make a difference. And I've had so many people over the years who have established their own groups, their own efforts, their own movements, and or have joined with others to make a difference. That's what really makes a difference. So really, you have to say to yourself, what am I good at? You know, what are my skills? What are my abilities? How can I put those skills and abilities to use to make this a better world? And that's really all you have to do. So it doesn't matter whether you're a lawyer or a teacher or an architect or anything, as long as you devote a part of your life to making it a better world for tomorrow. And each and every one of us has the power to do that.
You used to man boats and sink them sometimes. Do you still do that, or? Yeah, just speak more loudly, Alex.
Well, he asked if we used to ram boats and sink them sometimes. And yes, we did. We sank half of Iceland's whaling fleet in Reykjavik Harbor when they refused to comply with the moratorium on killing whales. There's nobody on board them when we sank them. We sank the pirate whaler Sierra after I rammed it in Portugal in 1979. We rammed it. We sank it in the port of Lisbon. We sank half the Spanish whaling fleet in Vigo in 1980. We sunk 4 Norwegian whaling ships. All of these vessels were in violation of the law. Now, example: if you sink half the whaling fleet of Iceland, you think that would be a crime. But it never really was a crime because there was never any charges, because they knew what they were doing was illegal. After a year of them saying, oh, you guys are whatever, I flew to Reykjavik and I landed at the airport, and it was actually quite flattering. I was met at the airport by 150 police officers, and the immigration officer comes up to me and says, how long do you intend to stay in Iceland? I said, I don't know, a week, a year, 5 years, you tell me. So what are the charges? So we went to interrogation, and I sat down and had everybody around there, and they said, are you admitting to sinking these ships in Iceland? I said, yeah, we sunk them. We're going to sink the other 2 at the first opportunity. The next day, they escorted me to the airport, put me on a plane, and sent me home. There were no charges. They did not. To put me on trial would be to put themselves on trial. And we have never been convicted of a crime, which is interesting because in 2010 we freed 800 bluefin tuna from the nets of a Maltese tuna poacher off the coast of Libya, and it was great. We sliced the net, and to see these guys go out like racehorses to freedom was incredible. Well, that company, Fish and Fish, the Maltese company, then charged me in the British courts with destruction of their property, and we went to court. And so what happened in the court was that the lower court sided with the poachers and awarded them. They sided with us and we won. Then it went to the appeals court and it overturned it and sided with them. And then 2 months ago it went to the Supreme Court in Britain and they overturned that and sided with us. And that company ended up giving us $1 million. for damages. So we have to fight these things in the battles. Now, some people might know that I'm actually on the Interpol Red List. This is the list that they put war criminals and serial killers on. But I'm on that list because the Japanese had charged me with conspiracy to trespass on a whaling boat. Nobody in the history of Interpol has ever been put on that list for such a minor crime. Nobody hurt, no damage to property, nothing stolen. But that just really shows about, the power that Japan has. The reason that I can come to France is that the French government took a look at it and said, well, this is silly, and let me in. That's the problem is a lot of these illegal operations are protected by their governments. And the reason that I'm on there is that in 2010, January 2011, a Japanese security vessel rammed and destroyed one of our ships, cut it in half, and almost killed the 6 people on it. The captain of that vessel went on board the Japanese vessel to confront him, the fact that he just destroyed my ship. They arrested him, took him back to Japan, and charged him with trespassing. And then they made a deal with him. If he would accuse me of ordering him to board it, which I didn't, and I'm on camera actually advising him not to do it, but if he would accuse me of doing that, then they would drop the charges against him or give him a suspended sentence, and then they would charge me, which is what they did. When he came back, he told everybody, he said, well, I lied to them to get off the thing, but the Japanese aren't interested in that. We have hurt Japan. They have lost over $200 million in profits from their illegal whaling activities. So they're very, very angry. And the Japanese are, they're not really a country to gracefully surrender, So they're very upset. They're upset with us because of the killing of the dolphins in Taiji. They're upset with us because we interfered with the killing of their whales.
So why is Greenpeace hostile to Sea Shepherd?
What's that?
Why is Greenpeace hostile to Sea Shepherd?
Why is Greenpeace what?
Hostile.
Hostile? Well, because a lot of the big organizations are hostile to Sea Shepherd because we say things they don't want to hear, or we do things that they don't want to be seen done. It's like, for instance, when the guys who make Cowspiracy went into the Greenpeace office and asked for an interview on why they're not saying anything about meat and its effect on climate change. They don't want to hear that stuff. Greenpeace, which I'm a co-founder of Greenpeace, but that organization has evolved into a 450 million euro a year operation. It's a big, big corporation. And those big corporations, by their very nature, don't really want to do anything because, see, they want to be all things to all people. And that means if you're going to do this, you're going to upset this group. We've been shot at, been rammed, get a lot of threats. And of course, probably, I would say the most dangerous things we do is actually going to the places we go. If you've ever been in an Antarctic storm, then you'll know that that's a dangerous situation. And also that translates too, not just afraid of death. You shouldn't be afraid of people ridiculing you. You shouldn't be afraid of people criticizing you, because why does it matter? You have to be true to what you believe in and not let other people's opinions impact you on how you feel, how you think, and what you want to do. Because if you want to be successful, ignore the rabble and go for what you believe in, follow your dreams, and forget the rest. The captain of the Shenandoah, James Waddell, was an inspiration. Writers like Farley Mowat, Edward Abbey, and Gray Owl were all conservationists who were inspirations. Diane Fossey, Jane Goodall, Verity Galdicos, but probably the lessons that have been most important to me are those that I've learned from the animals that I work with. And I'll just finish off maybe with the fact that one of the things that changed my life was in 1975 when we came up with this idea to protect whales by putting our bodies between the harpoons, and I was with Greenpeace at the time. We were reading a lot of Mahatma Gandhi at the time, and we thought, nobody's going to risk killing a human being to kill a whale. So Robert Hunter and I found ourselves in a small inflatable boat in front of a 150-foot steel-hulled Soviet harpoon vessel that was bearing down on us at 20 knots. And in front of us were 8 magnificent sperm whales that were fleeing for their life. And every time the harpooner tried to get a shot, I would maneuver the boat and block his shot with the harpoon gun. And that worked for about 25 minutes until the captain on the Soviet vessel came down the catwalk and he screamed into the ear of the harpooner. We could see that. Then he turned.
On était désolés de
En fait, je suis happée par des choses qui
Qu'est-ce que vous avez pensé de cette personnalité et de ce combat Ça vous inspire quoi justement?
Il faut courageux, il ne faut pas avoir peur. Il
Ouais.
faut bien continuer dans la vie. Quand on fait un truc, on continue. Et jamais s'arrêter.
Là,
Continuer.
il y a une autre leçon, c'est que c'est un paradoxe que dans un collège, on vienne vous présenter une figure de l'insubordination et de la désobéissance. Et donc, c'est ça qui est intéressant, c'est que la désobéissance peut être parfois, pas toujours, mais parfois, une forme très élevée de la civilisation. Et c'est en ce sens que moi je suis content que des voies un peu différentes et des trajectoires de pirates puissent être présentées comme exemple, parce qu'on n'est pas là que pour obéir aux règles qui s'abattent sur nous. On est là aussi pour décider que parfois il y a nécessité de passer dans la voie parallèle, de passer à côté parce que il y a des urgences. Alors, bien sûr qu'on ne peut pas toujours être nous-mêmes, jugés partis. On ne peut pas toujours décider que tout ce qu'on fait est bien et que la manière dont on le fait, elle doit s'imposer comme ça. Mais en même temps, on ne peut pas non plus décider qu'une fois pour toutes, sous prétexte qu'il y a des règles, il faut absolument les respecter, alors que les espèces animales sont en train de disparaître, alors que les mers sont complètement polluées et deviennent des poubelles pour les déchets radioactifs, etc., que les grands équilibres environnementaux sont mis en cause. Voilà, donc parfois, il faut secouer un tout petit peu les choses et pour faire prendre conscience. Et moi, ça me plaît bien que dans un collège où on enseigne quand même à penser, le message qui passe, c'est on n'est pas là que pour obéir. On est là pour obéir, mais on est là aussi pour agir et pour penser le monde. Voilà, c'est pour ça que je voulais discuter un peu la manière dont vous aviez reçu cette matinée-là. J'espère que je ne vous ai pas cassé les pieds. C'est vrai ?
Merci pour l'information.
Perfect.